Hello, welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to let a few people come into the session before starting properly. Okay, hello and good morning, good afternoon to you from wherever you are joining us from today. Welcome to this Reuters Events Supply Chain webinar. We're delighted to have you. The title for today's session is Too Big to Fail, Ensuring a Successful Supply Chain Transformation. We know that leaders are always thinking about ways to improve their supply chains, especially in a year like 2025, when there are so many potential disruptions either happening right now or on the near horizon. And of course, transformations can take many different forms, but they all face their own unique challenges. And in this webinar, we're going to hear from two fantastic supply chain leaders about how they have worked through these challenges at their organizations. And hopefully you can take away some useful strategies and tips that you can implement at your organizations too. But before I introduce today's speakers, I wanted to launch a poll just to get the temperature of the room and to hear a little bit about what our audience today thinks about supply chain transformation. So I'm going to do that now. And the title for this poll, it's Barriers to Supply Chain Transformation. And we've got several different options. Lack of stakeholder support, integration challenges, inaccurate or poorly managed data, inability to prioritize, inability to prioritize transformations, cybersecurity risks that come with these transformations, and then regulatory compliance as well. So have a look at that poll. I can see someone started voting already, and yeah, put your thoughts there. So now I'm going to come back to our speakers. So I'd like you both to take a moment to introduce yourselves. Could I start with Amy, please?
Sure, thanks, Hugh. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Augustine. I'm the Senior Director of Network Supply Chain for US Cellular. We're the 5th largest wireless carrier in the United States. My team and I have responsibility for strategic sourcing and procurement, planning and forecasting, inventory operations, warehousing, and logistics for anything that goes into building and maintaining our cell sites. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about this topic.
Amazing, Amy, thank you so much. And Danny, could I come to you now, please?
Okay. I'm Danny Antezana. I'm responsible for global supply chain at DSM Firmenich, specifically for the health, nutrition, and care business. Happy to be with Amy again in another session with you, Hugh, and your colleagues.
Amazing. Thank you both. And also just to add that both Amy and Danny will be speaking at our conference in June in Chicago on the 9th and 10th of June. So definitely look out for them there if you're attending that one. So I wanted to start by asking you both to tell us about a recent supply chain transformation that took place at your organization. And then we can kind of get into what the challenges were. But could we start just by talking about what the transformation was and why it was a priority? So Amy, could I come to you first on that one, please?
Sure, Hugh. So about 3 years ago, when I took over this role from my predecessor, we did not have a planning and forecasting function. We did not have a warehousing and logistics function, and we didn't have an inventory operations function. And so I needed to transform my organization to put in those supply chain groups and processes to be successful. And it wasn't a picnic. It wasn't a walk in the park. It was a lot of change management, a lot of handholding, a lot of really difficult conversations, both with my current team at the time and my stakeholders. And when you think of supply chain transformation, sometimes it's a technology transformation. In this case, for us, it was basically putting in basic supply chain processes and getting folks aligned to those processes. And it was a lot of work. We were successful, but it took some time. Like I said, a lot of conversations. We made some mistakes along the way, but we had a roadmap and we stuck to it, and we stuck to our strategy and we delivered on it. Hugh and I have had some conversations about some unique other areas in my planning function, because I think the forecasting and planning part of my team was probably the most difficult to transform. And when you think about building a cell site, there's so many external factors that impact it. And so a lot of them are even out of control, right? They're not even like, I can't get my supply from China. It's nothing like that. It's literally, it's osprey nesting season and there's a nest on this tower and now we have to delay the build, right? So it's these crazy things that how do you plan and forecast for osprey nesting season and the odds that an osprey might want to build a nest on a cell site, right? So just very interesting things and nuances we got into as we talked about our transformation in the planning area and how do we account for those things.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more about how those roadblocks were noticed and then worked around internally. But before we come to that, Danny, could I kind of ask you the same question? Could you tell us about a recent supply chain transformation that took place in DSM-Firmenich, and what exactly it was and why it was a priority?
Absolutely. No. So first, I would start with a very, very brief context. So we're talking about a company that two companies that merged a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. DSM on one side and Firmenich on the other side, becoming DSM-Firmenich. And this merge resulted into business units becoming quite independent. So it's an important context to share, and it's going to help to understand why we decided to go through this transformation. Then taking the HNC, which stands for the Health, Nutrition, and Care business, a year and a half ago, we found between 20 and 30 different digital solutions and initiatives running in parallel, pretty much led and driven by the developers, not much by the business itself or by the end users, mostly of them located in the regions. So the key transformation was to select the top priorities out of this quite extensive list and change the approach. Instead of running many initiatives and overloading the users, overloading the developers, we selected just 5 top priorities. And we committed with the different levels and with the organization to just stick to these 5. And bringing the very clear principle that no additional initiative will be added to this list without having one of these 5 fully implemented and adopted by the users. And to give a more idea what exactly I'm talking about, just to list some of the initiatives, we're talking about an automated KPI dashboard, very user-friendly. We're talking about another solution helping order management, which is a solution that automatically assigns product and batch to a customer's order, giving reliable information on quantities and availability dates for that. So helping the order management and giving the right information almost automatically every time the customers place an order. There are others that I can share later, but for me the key message is try to bring the less is more approach and engage the entire organization into the right objectives, into the right priorities.
Okay, so yeah, so just focusing on those key 5 priorities, cutting things down to something more manageable and reasonable, and focusing on those. So yeah, so that's really good to know. So I guess now sort of moving on, like thinking about these transformations actually in the process, in the going through that journey. Once you both started on these transformations, these roadblocks that you kind of noticed along the way, how were they initially flagged in the organization, and how are they communicated internally? Like Amy, I guess when it comes to the osprey nesting season, that could have been one certain way. Maybe the osprey just let you know about that, but also some of the other issues. How do these get communicated internally?
You know, for me, bad news can't wait, right? So both going up to my executives and then going down to my team and across to my peers. And so, you know, taking the example of the osprey nesting season, right? My peer and I talked about it. Like there's really no way, there's no getting around that, right? We can't build that site while there's an active nest. And so how do you change the thought from, oh, we've hit like this massive roadblock and we can't do what we need to do, but start thinking creatively and getting that message across to the teams that actually were working on the solution to be like, okay, we have this roadblock, but how do we think differently about that roadblock and how do we get creative and solve for that roadblock? And then communicating that back across the teams, both the folks working on it, up to me, up to my, I can then communicate it across to my peers and have a conversation, and then informing our executives of the solution that we came up with to solve for that, right? And so communication is key. I think having a really, when you sit down to do any transformation, like that's one of the key things that I make sure I have is a communication plan, right? Because if you don't communicate, people are making assumptions, and the adult saying about assumptions, right? So you don't want to have that happen, right? So I sometimes even err to the side of over communicating, but I'd rather have people know what's going on than sitting back in their office assuming something that's not happening.
Mm. And I guess, could you give us a sense of the stakes here as well? You're trying to get this project done. You've hit a roadblock and you're communicating up and down. You're making sure everyone knows about it. But I guess, could you tell us about what parts of the transformation did this affect, this challenge, and like what were some of the costs of these roadblocks in terms of, I don't know,
yeah. So if you take osprey nesting season, it all ties back to how do we effectively plan and forecast and get to just-in-time inventory? Because the more inventory I carry in my warehouses, that's a really bad use of working capital, right? Because it's sitting there, it's not being deployed, right? And then I get a lot of questions of like, this has been sitting for a while, what are we doing? So for us, it really was about how do we effectively move inventory and not have it sit in warehouses for 6 to 8, 12 months, that it's getting deployed, the cell site's getting built, and the working capital's not sitting. So it all went back to us to working capital. So I was getting a lot of questions like inventory sitting, how are we moving faster? How do we get more effective, and how we purchase this and not have it sit in a warehouse for a long period of time.
Okay, yeah. So really, yeah, there's a real urgency there. And that kind of would have been a frustrating roadblock to hit. So Danny, I guess I want to come to you the same question. You've put in place this attitude of, or this mindset of like narrowing down the challenges, like let's focus on these top 5, which are the priorities, and let's get these ones done. But then once you're kind of started on that journey, what were some of the roadblocks that were then noticed? How were they communicated? And what parts of the transformation did they affect?
Yeah, perfect. So the first was the resistance in accepting a short list. So politically speaking, it's not nice to say, oh, there are pretty nice solutions available to be implemented, but you're saying no. But it's not a permanent no, it's a temporary no. Right? It's just because we want to set the priorities, we want to implement them faster, but have tangible solutions available to the end users. That's one thing. The second roadblock that I would mention is not having the solutions coming from global to regions, like top down, but instead of that, trying to motivate the regions and involve the regions into decisions. When I say regions, please understand like the execution, who is really running the show. Really engaging the team and making a bottom up approach. So with that, these short list of 5 priorities became not only the global list, but also the execution, regional, local teams' priorities. So that was the biggest, I would say, mindset change, where everybody became part of the decision. Second, we added these to their own objectives, so making everybody accountable and responsible for the execution. Because before that, it was just the developers' responsibility to push and force the implementation. But the users were looking sometimes and saying, why do I need that? I never asked for it. And changing this to a point that the regions were not only interested, loving it, but fully engaged in getting the solution implemented as soon as possible. To the final question you asked on the cost, I would say that it took us longer to get everybody fully informed and engaged. And I will take the AIM as example that over communication was key. Keep repeating into different sides of the organization to be very consistent with this approach. It took us a while to get everybody on board, but once that happened, the implementation was easy.
Okay, thanks, Danny. I want to, before we move on to talk about sort of, yeah, the kind of final part of these transformation journeys and how how you overcame these roadblocks and then thinking at the end about lessons learned. I want to just finish our poll because obviously I launched that at the beginning of the webinar. I haven't ended it yet, and share the results. And so, as you can see, it was a tie between lack of stakeholder support and integration challenges. While inaccurate or poorly managed data was there also, and someone also thought that inability to prioritize was key. And so, yeah, so I guess some integration challenges. I didn't put Osprey nesting season on this multiple choice. That's why no one chose it. But yeah, integration challenges and lack of stakeholder support, which I think maybe speaks a little bit, Danny, to what you're saying about kind of getting everyone engaged, getting everyone kind of on board, like getting past those resistance blockers. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And just to say to our audience, there is a Q&A function, so feel free to pop any questions that you have in that little Q&A function at the bottom of your screen there that you can see. So yeah, so thank you for kind of walking us through what these transformations were and then what some of the roadblocks were. Now we kind of want to kind of think about the end of this journey and how you overcame these. And so, yeah, just thinking firstly, we'll come to the lessons learned at the end, but thinking firstly about the strategies, individuals or tools that were kind of pivotal in getting through these roadblocks and then also kind of what the kind of finished product looked like and like what the transformation looked like in the end. So Amy, could you tell us a little bit about that, the tools that you use to get through these roadblocks and then the final picture?
Yeah, I think the key for myself and my team was I came up with a strategy, a plan, and a very robust change management plan. And so I took the time and I sat through and identified who were going to be my resistors, right? Who were going to be the people I really had to pay attention to and really work the hardest to bring them on board. Who were going to be my, like I call them my cheerleaders, who were going to get on board right away and help move this along. And so I spent probably a good month or so putting together a change management plan, which then fed into my whole, how am I communicating to people? How am I going to deliver on my strategy and bring everybody along for the journey, that everyone felt like they had a part and a role, even if they weren't on my team, right? And so one of the other roadblocks I didn't talk about, but that we had was my team was taking over functions from our engineering team that they were performing kind of supply chain activities, and they didn't need to do that. Like they needed to let us supply chain worry about getting the materials. They needed to worry about other stuff. And so, and that went along with my change management plan and making sure that they understood, they started trusting us. And it, like I said, it was a process. We had some bumps in the road, but really because I had laid out that and I understood who the people were. And I even had resistors on my own current team, like who flat out told me like, this is never going to work. They won't agree to do it. And, you have to work through it and you have to, talk to them, hear them out, listen to their concerns, and then be that positive person and be like, yeah, but we have to try, because just because we think it might be difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't try it. So I spent probably a lot of time thinking through a change management plan to get the organization to move.
And is that reluctance, like is it just a reluctance to change, and it's just like some people just don't like change, right? Or is it that there was more sort of specific disagreements about like the transformation itself, like?
So I think a lot of it was resistance to change, right? Like we've always done it this way. It works. Why do we need to change, right? And you have to kind of show like, well, this is why. And my partners in engineering now, they can focus on the build plan, on actually building the site and working with their general contractors. They don't have to worry about hunting down parts and, figuring out where it is. I mean, to give you an example, when I took over this role, they used to blame supply chain for not meeting their build plan. Now they call us out because we help them meet their build plan. So if you think about how much the pendulum has shifted from, they're the reasons why we didn't make our numbers, to they're the reasons, one of the big reasons why we're making our numbers, because we've worked to get the material where they need it.
And so that was kind of my follow-up question, was kind of what does success now look like? What has this transformation got you? And I guess you started this webinar by saying that, yeah, when you started in your role, what was it, sort of 3 or 4 years ago, they didn't have any of these processes in place. So what does it look like now?
So now we have the processes in place. We've delivered. My partners in engineering have met their build plan numbers. In fact, they exceeded them last year, and it wasn't all like sunshine and roses in the supply chain. I had a lot of issues with suppliers and getting the right supply and having them deliver on time. So it took a lot of creativity from my team and a lot of partnering with engineering and communicating with them, like, hey, the supply's not coming in when it was supposed to. We need to think about moving around and really working and partnering together.
Okay, thanks for that, Amy. I'll come back to you for your final kind of lessons learned that you can share with the audience in a moment. But Danny, I guess, yeah, the same questions to you. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but on this journey you're on, what were those kind of final strategies really proved effective in kind of getting past these roadblocks? And then what did that transformation success look like in the end?
Very good, very good. So after the very, very, I would say, intense communication phase in trying to convince everybody that that was the right approach, even not the most popular in reducing the list of initiatives. The key element for the strategy was to keep informing or over communicating everybody about the progress, keeping everybody engaged. And you may think that for any project, you have always the two elements, the one who's the project manager or developer, and then you have the final user. So if you don't have these both sides fully connected on the same page, you may have the first discrepancy and the first gap. In this case, after aligning, showing progress, and implementing the first out of these 5, it proved that that was the right thing to do. And it gave the teams, both the users and the developers, a lot of confidence that that was the right approach. Because I can tell you, and openly, people were not convinced about this approach in the beginning. Actually, they were like very resistant in accepting it, because they had a lot of people ready to run the show from the development part and saying, well, we're telling them to wait. And actually, the proposal was, no, we're just asking to reshuffle and reorganize the resources to accelerate the execution of the initiatives that are really critical for our business. Continue with your question in terms of at the very end, what was the end? Clear, successful implementation of the top 5 that were automatically replaced by other 5, one by one. Seeing these solutions fully adopted, so the users are today the most, I would say, relevant and as ambassadors to promote these solutions. Because also we didn't explode, like it wasn't a big bang implementation. We decided to make a rollout region after region, and having the previous region promoting the solution to the next one. But also very good learning from this process. And if I could summarize as the last question of the final lesson learned of this experience, was engaging everybody, putting objectives, common objectives to everybody, being very selective in the priorities, open up for discussions, and engaging people, making them part of a decision, not just top-down decision and pushing for implementations. And finally, we gave them time to work properly. There are so many issues in system implementation, solution implementation, when you don't have a proper user acceptance test. Just because users are doing 5 times, 10 times, 10 things at the same time. There was another lesson learned, giving them time to digest and to run what was really meaningful for them.
Thanks, Danny. That's really helpful. And you also mentioned, I remember in in our kickoff call, that kind of whole attitude that until everyone was fully adopted these solutions and they were getting used, you wouldn't want to move on to more solutions. That was a really important aspect, because you want to make sure you're seeing these ones adopted first.
Correct. That's an interesting part. When I first arrived to these new businesses after the merger, I realized that out of these 20, 30 initiatives list, half of it was in green status, fully implemented. So wow, very interesting. Then I start checking with the users about implementation, about the system reliability, and the feedback was totally different. Saying, no, it's not implemented, nobody's using it, or there are gaps never solved, or hypercare was not long enough. So basically it was a depository of solutions that nobody was using. But from the development perspective, indeed, it was all of them were fully implemented, but not adopted by the users. So that was another challenge for us to say, okay, what is driving this gap? Because you have a nice park in the parking lot, but nobody's driving it.
Yeah.
That's another interesting lesson learned, and how to really connect the users and implement and adopt something that is meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's really that's so telling, that your description of all these green lights and then actually speaking to someone, and lo and behold. Amy, I'd love to know what some of the key lessons you learned from this transformation journey that you went on in the last few years.
Well, I think number one, that there always will be a curveball that comes out of left field. Like the example of the osprey nesting season. I did not see that one coming, right? But you know, it's going to happen. Take a deep breath, stay calm, and figure out how you solve for it, right? I think a lot of times, you know, us in supply chain, you know, and then we talked about this, I think yesterday on the prep call for this, right? Like something happens in the news and all of a sudden it's an emergency and the supply chain needs to come in and fix it. And it's sometimes it's not, right? And it's just news, and we're already working on it, and we have our, you know, plans and our risk mitigation plans. And, you know, it's sometimes being able to also departmentalize those and send those on their way, and then figure out how to keep going on your journey. And so for me, it was kind of balancing some of those as well as we went along our journey, like, oh, this is happening. We have an issue with this supplier, and, you know, the sky's on fire and we have to fix it. And it's like, take a deep breath. We'll fix it. We have plans. We know what we're doing. And, you know, it's kind of like stay calm and carry on, right? And that's probably the biggest lesson learned was, you know, keeping my team calm, keeping my peers calm, keeping my executives calm, and moving on.
Expect the unexpected and keep calm and carry on were the two things I'd written down there. So yeah, I think really, really valuable lessons. And I think a lot of the other points that you've mentioned throughout this session, both of you, really, really valuable. And I hope our viewers are going to take away some useful tips and pieces of advice back to their own organizations. And before I thank everyone, I just wanted to remind you all that both Amy and Danny will be speaking at our conference in Chicago this June. It's Reuters Events Supply Chain USA 2025. And I hope you can all make it. Danny, I wanted to say thank you so much for speaking today. And Amy, likewise, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for attending this session. Make sure to catch the next one, and have a great day. All the best.
Good. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you.
Bye.